Hello, how you doing? It's Phil Thatch. Have you ever reviewed a product and you just know it's going to be good even before you start the review? Well, that's the situation I'm in today because today I'm going to review the Viltrox 56mm f1.7 for Sony E Mount. And this is the first time I've had the privilege of reviewing a Viltrox product for Sony E, but I have reviewed this same lens for Nikon Z, and even though it's very inexpensive, it is really, really good. So I'm excited today about getting this 56mm f1.7 lens and putting it on my Sony a6700. So here they are. This one is the Nikon version, and this one is the Sony version. You can see the much larger flange at the bottom of the Nikon because the Z mount is so much larger than the E mount. But otherwise, they are identical. So let's take a look at the construction of the AF56 1.7E from Viltrox. The lens is basically all plastic, and that's fine. Expensive lenses from Nikon, Canon, and Sony are all plastic like this, so it's no big deal. It's got a nice pedal style lens hood that goes on and off easily. My one complaint about it is when you get it all the way in position, it doesn't have a click. So of course it won't just turn by itself, but you could bump it and turn it out of position. It has a pinch style lens cap, 52mm filter thread on this. The rear cap fits nicely, doesn't come off, it's not loose. Here's a close-up look at the rear of the lens, and as you can see, it is a metal lens mount. Looks high quality, and you can also see a USB-C port for firmware updates if needed in the future. So here is my A6700, and let's pop this thing on there and see how well it fits. Got a nice white marker, easy to line up. Clicks right into place. There's no play on there, and the size of the lens fits the body well. Looks good on there. Now this is 56mm, and 56mm on an APS-C body like this, which has a 1.5 crop, that gives you 84mm full frame equivalent, which is right next door to 85mm, which a lot of people say is the perfect portrait focal length. So this is basically a portrait lens. It has a nice fast aperture, f1.7, and it's virtually 85mm. But when I tested out the Nikon version, I did a lot of portraits with it, but right now I don't have anybody to take pictures of. Heather's at work, and my daughter's at school in Knoxville, so I'm going to do some other types of photography with this lens. If you want to see what it looks like with portrait work, I'll put a link to my Nikon review of this lens at the end of the video, and you can take a look at that. But I'm going to do basically a photo walk with this lens, probably around Chattanooga, and see what kind of shots I can get with it. So my first shot I actually made just right out front of our house where my zinnia garden is going crazy. I made this video on August the 1st. This lens has a minimum focus distance of 0.55 meters or 1.8 feet, so it doesn't get really, really close. And I focused on this zinnia right here and got as close as I could and made this shot. So this is it's not a macro lens is basically what I'm telling you. This is as close as you can get. But at f1.7, it sure does leave you with a nice soft background. This is 56mm, obviously. It's a 56mm prime, wide open at 1.7. and 1/1000th of a second. So now I'm in downtown Chattanooga. Actually, I'm on the North Shore. This is Coolidge Park, and I made a photograph of this lion, which is part of a fountain there. My focus point was right here. And you can see it's plenty sharp, even wide open. This is wide open at 1.7, and this is 1/1600th of a second and 200 ISO. This is also wide open at 1.7. This is a shot from the park looking up at the pedestrian bridge. I probably should have shot this at f4 or 5.6, but I shot it wide open just to see. This is an area of Coolidge Park, the Peace Grove, and inside this little area are trees. And the trees are in honor of various cities that are Chattanooga's sister cities around the world. And I just took a picture of this little marker that as you enter the grove at f1.7 and 1/640th of a second. I thought it was nice and sharp, even wide open at 1.7, and the background is beautiful at 1.7. Now this shot is cropped to a panorama. Later I make a multi-shot panorama, but this shot is cropped as a panorama, and it's f1.7 as well. Probably would have looked better at f4. And this is, of course, 56 millimeters, 1/640th. I thought the lady walking by with her fancy paddleboard trailer was pretty cool there in the huge park. This is the golden painted horse on top of the carousel building, and it looks like the golden painted horse needs a repaint. This is also wide open at f1.7. I went over to the next park right next door to Coolidge Park. It's called Renaissance Park, and there's lots of just kind of wild areas. And I found what I believe is the skeleton of a cicada bug, and I made a photograph of it. This is also wide open at 1.7, 1/1000th. This is further back in Renaissance Park, and I made a picture of this sign. I stopped it down to f4. When I shot it wide open, the aquarium building, which is all the way across the river, was so out of focus you couldn't even tell what it was. So at f4, there's still lots of nice separation, but at least you can tell what the aquarium building is. Now this is actually a panorama. This is 8 shots. I turned the camera vertical and made 8 shots handheld, keeping the camera as steady as possible, and I stitched these together in Lightroom. This is f5 and 1/640th of a second. And because this is a real panorama with 8 shots, it is very high resolution. If I go to 100%, you can see there's still tons of detail, even zooming in this far. There's one of the aquarium buildings and the other aquarium building. Just all sorts of stuff. This is the baseball stadium where the Chattanooga Lookouts play. This is Ross's Landing. Right here is the very top of a parking garage that I do photography from sometimes. Chattanooga, Tennessee, from the North Shore. And I like that idea of the panorama so much that I made another shot looking across at the aquarium buildings. This is a single shot, and I stepped back far enough to where I was kind of shooting through some trees, and I let the trees kind of frame the aquarium buildings. This one's also at f4, looking across at the 2 aquarium buildings with some of the medium-sized skyscrapers that you can see in the Chattanooga skyline behind them. There were these 2 ladies that were jogging with their strollers. They were going around Renaissance Park at a pretty good clip, and I made this photograph of one of them as she went by with the aquarium in the background. And this is at f1.7, and I focused on the aquarium, so she is in the foreground with her youngster, and they're completely out of focus as they run by. There's this unusual looking blue rhinoceros there on the North Shore, and this is further upstream on the Tennessee River. The Bluff View Art District is directly across the river in the background of this shot, and I made a photograph of the blue rhino, just its head, at f1.7. My focus point was right here on the eye, and you can see it's nice and sharp. I made another shot of the Bluff View Art District, and you can see why it gets that name, because the Hunter Museum of Art is all of this building up on top of this huge bluff looking over the Tennessee River. And when I saw this rather large boat going up the Tennessee River, I had to get a shot of it in front of the museum. This one is at f4. So now I'm going to show you a video clip that I made wide open at f1.7, and I know I didn't make any portraits to demonstrate what this lens can do as a portrait, but just watch this video clip and it will show you what this lens could do wide open making portraits. Well, I've been walking around Coolidge and Renaissance Park making some photographs, as you've seen, and now I thought I'd do a little video test. I've got the lens wide open at 1.7. and I'm just letting the shutter speed go crazy, so I'm definitely not following the 180-degree rule right now, but you could with this lens just put a neutral density filter on, and hopefully it looks pretty good. Tell me what you think in the comments. So they make this fantastic little lens for Nikon Z, and they charge $139, which is ridiculously inexpensive. They also make it for Fuji X, which is another APS-C mount, and it's $180 on Fuji, which is still a bargain. It's not a an unbelievable bargain, but it's still, I mean, I would think this lens ought to sell for 300 bucks. But it's 180 for Fuji X, and it's also 180 for the Sony E Mount, which is a great bargain, great lens for a great bargain. But holy cow, if you are a Nikon shooter, the $139 Nikon version is unbelievable. Thank you very much for tuning in to this quick review and photo walk with the new Viltrox 56mm f1.7 for Sony E Mount APS-C cameras. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, reach down, hit the thumbs up button. That helps me out a lot. If you want to see some more content like this, subscribe and hit the bell. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye-bye.